I woke up sneezing 3 times in a row, the kind of late August pollen morning that made my eyes water before I'd even finished my coffee. And I almost called out sick from the cardiac rehab center. I'm glad I didn't, because I would have missed the whole thing, and I still can't decide if that would have been a mercy or a loss. I'd been at Larkspur Cardiac Wellness for 2 years, running the treadmill sessions and the stress tests, telling men in their 60s to slow down when their heart rate crept too high, telling them the opposite when they babied themselves out of fear. It was steady work, quiet work. Nothing about that Thursday morning suggested it would stop being either. "You've got a new intake at 10, Ronnie said, tapping the schedule on the shared monitor. Self-referred, not through cardiology. Odd. Most of my patients came stapled to a discharge packet, a cardiologist's scrawl telling me what not to let them do. A self-referral was rare enough that I actually read the name twice. Owen Castellano. It meant nothing to me. Names rarely do, until a face walks in behind them and rearranges something in your memory you didn't know was sitting there loose. He walked in at 9:58, early the way people are when they've rehearsed a thing in the car. Broad through the shoulders, a little grey threading into a beard that hadn't been there before, and eyes that found mine and just stopped, like he'd been running toward a door that turned out to already be open. "You don't recognize me," he said. Not a question. Almost relieved, like it gave him a running start. I looked harder, and the ordinary shape of a stranger's face pulled apart into someone I'd spent 3 weeks with, back when he was pale and tethered to monitors on the cardiac floor at Beacon Memorial, back when I was the night nurse who kept catching him awake at 2 in the morning, arguing with himself about whether he was going to make it out of that room a different, smaller man. "Owen," I said, and the sound of it landed strange in my mouth, half memory and half surprise. "You look." I didn't finish, because what I wanted to say was alive in a different way than you were, and that felt too big for a Thursday at 10 in the morning. "Good, I hope," he said. 50 pounds down. I run now. Badly, but I run. "That's not why you're here, though." I said it before I'd decided to. Something about him standing in my gym in street clothes instead of a hospital gown had scrambled my professional caution, made me forget for a second that I was supposed to be handing him an intake clipboard, not studying the line of his jaw for what had changed. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I moved to a different cardiologist across town months ago. Full clearance, no restrictions, haven't set foot in a hospital since March." "I'm not your patient anymore, Ray. Haven't been for a long time." "Then what's the clipboard for?" "Ronnie needed something to write my name on the schedule," he said, and the corner of his mouth pulled up like he'd been waiting all morning to say that. I told him I wanted a consultation. He didn't ask about what. I should have laughed it off, should have handed him back to the front desk and reminded myself that whatever this was, it lived in a grey zone I had no map for. Instead, I stood there holding a clipboard that suddenly felt like evidence of something, and I asked the only question that mattered. Why now? It's been what, 10 months? 10 months and 6 days, he said, and didn't apologize for knowing the number. I told myself the whole time I was your patient that if I made it out, if I actually did the work, I'd come find you and see if what I felt in that room was real or just. I don't know, gratitude wearing a costume. Doctors warn you about that. Nurses too, probably. They do. We're trained on it in the first year, the way fear and relief can dress themselves up as something warmer. The way a person recovering from the worst weeks of their life will sometimes fall for the first kind face that shows up at 3 in the morning with a warm blanket and a steady voice. I'd watched it happen to colleagues. I'd promised myself it would never happen to me, not because I didn't feel things, but because feeling them while someone's heart rate was still my responsibility felt like a debt I could never repay, honestly. So you waited, I said. I waited until it wasn't your job to be kind to me anymore. I wanted to know if you'd still bother. He shrugged, and for the first time since he'd walked in, the confidence slipped, and I saw the same uncertain man who used to ask me if the numbers on the monitor meant he was dying. I've thought about how to say this for months, and every version sounded insane out loud, so I got in the car. I've thought a lot since then about what it means that some part of me had been waiting too, quietly, without admitting it. The way you keep a coat by the door for weather you're not sure is coming. There were nights on that floor when I'd sat with him past the point my job required it, When I'd told him things about my own father's heart attack that I never told patients, when I'd caught myself hoping his numbers would trend steady just one more day so I'd have an excuse to check on him again. I told myself that was just good nursing. I'm not sure anymore that it was only that. I can't have coffee with a current patient, I said slowly. And I definitely can't with someone who thinks I saved his life, because that's not the same thing as. I don't think you saved my life, he said. The surgeons did that. You're the reason I wanted to keep it. He let that sit a second. There's a difference, and I've had 10 months to figure out which one I was chasing. That's the part I keep turning over, even now. How do you know when someone reappears out of a season of your life that was built entirely on your care for them, whether what's between you is real or just the residue of crisis, the kind of bond that feels enormous in a hospital room and evaporates the second the fear does? I've seen it go both ways. I've seen it curdle into something awkward and sad, two people who mistook survival for chemistry. I've also seen it, once, become somebody's whole marriage. I honestly don't know which side I'd land on if I hadn't decided, right there, to find out. 1 cup of coffee, I told him. Not here. Not in scrubs. If it's nothing, we shake hands and you go back to badly running. And if it's not nothing? Then I guess we find out what a person's supposed to do about it, I said, because nobody teaches you that part in nursing school. We went to the diner 2 blocks over, the one with the pie case that never quite empties, and he told me about the runs he does along the river at 6 in the morning. And I told him about the patient in bed 9 who still sends me a birthday card every year, and somewhere between the coffee and the pie, neither of us ordered, but both ended up eating, the grey zone I'd been so afraid of just quietly closed. Up behind us like a door that had finally found its frame. It's been 4 months now. He still doesn't come to Larkspur except to pick me up in the parking lot after my shift, standing by his car the way he stood in that doorway, like he still isn't sure he's allowed. I tell him he is. I tell myself, too, on the nights I still wonder if I let this happen too fast, or not fast enough, or exactly on time, that the 10 months he waited were their own kind of answer, and that some things you don't get to choose so much as recognize the second time they walk back through the door.